Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night and realized the person sleeping beside you isn't who you thought they were? I used to think I married the perfect man, until the night I pretended to sip his tea. That's when I found out my husband wasn't just lying to me. He was living under a stolen name, hiding passports, and keeping secrets buried under our bedroom floorboards. Before I take you deeper into what I uncovered about my husband, let me ask you, if you want to hear more stories where love turns into betrayal and survival, make sure you subscribe to Flame and Fate Chronicles. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. My name is Julian Ward, and if you asked anyone who knew me 5 years ago, they'd have told you I had the kind of life people envied. I was 33, working as an archivist at the Seattle Public Library, surrounded by manuscripts, maps, and books older than the country itself. My job was quiet, steady, and exactly the kind of order I loved. That's where Julian came in. Julian Ward, my husband. He wasn't just a man who appreciated history. He lived and breathed it. He owned a rare bookshop down in Pioneer Square, filled with shelves that smelled of leather and dust, where sunlight hit golden spines like church windows. He had this way of quoting old poetry without sounding pretentious, of slipping a verse of Whitman or Keats into casual conversation. When we met at a small auction house, he was bidding on a set of 18th century atlases. I was there on behalf of the library, trying to stretch a laughably small budget. He noticed me outbidding him, and instead of scowling, he leaned over and whispered, "Whoever you are, you just broke my heart and stole my map." I laughed harder than I should have, and that was it. Julian swept me into his orbit. We married after a whirlwind year. My parents adored him. My colleagues envied me. Even strangers commented on how perfectly matched we looked. Him in his tailored jackets, me in my librarian cardigans. And to be fair, at first, he was perfect. He made me dinner on late work nights. He always kissed my forehead when I fell asleep over my laptop. He tucked handwritten love notes into the pockets of my coats. But even perfection has shadows. Julian had little quirks, things I brushed off back then. He always wanted control of our finances, claiming he was better with numbers. He hated when I stayed at the library too late, always insisting I text him when I left. And then there was his tea, the special blends he brewed for me every night. Lavender and chamomile, he said, to calm my nerves. I thought it was sweet, until I noticed how deeply I slept afterward. So deep that I'd wake with entire nights missing, like hours had been swallowed up by a fog. Still, I told myself it was stress. Work, life. The miscarriages we'd suffered, 2 in the span of 3 years, had left me hollowed out, exhausted, and craving the safety Julian promised. But if I had looked closer, if I had listened to the unease curling in my stomach, maybe I would have realized sooner that my husband wasn't collecting books at all. He was collecting women. And the night I found my own name written in his leather-bound journal was the night my perfect life collapsed. The night it happened, I wasn't even looking for trouble. I'd been cataloging a donation at the library all day, a stack of old travel diaries from the 1920s, written in tight, looping script that made my eyes ache. By the time I got home, my head was pounding. Julian was in his study, the yellow lamplight spilling out under the crack of the door, and I called out softly that I was going to bed early. He appeared in the doorway, smiling, holding a steaming cup. Chamomile, lavender, and a pinch of valerian root. "Sleep like the dead, my love." He always said that. Sleep like the dead. I forced a smile, kissed his cheek, and carried the mug upstairs. I didn't drink it. I poured it down the sink, rinsed the cup, and left it on the counter as if I had. Something in me, call it instinct, call it dread, told me not to. When I came back down, the house was quiet, except for the faint creak of Julian's chair in his study. I should have gone to bed. Instead, I found myself standing in the doorway, staring at his desk. Julian was meticulous about that desk. An antique oak thing, drawers locked, surfaces always wiped clean. But that night, he'd left it ajar, as if daring me. I told myself I was just curious. Just a wife peeking into her husband's world. My fingers brushed past fountain pens, folded receipts, and beneath a false bottom I didn't even know was there. I found a leather-bound journal. It was heavy, the kind of weight that felt important. My heart thudded as I opened it. Inside weren't poems or book lists. They were names. Women's names. Page after page, written in Julian's steady, elegant hand. Each name paired with details. Age, hair color, hometown, dates. Beside some were notes. Secured. Assets transferred. Terminated. I flipped faster, my hands shaking. Halfway through the journal, my breath caught. There, on the page, my name. Lena Ward. And beside it, nothing. Just a blank line. It was as if he'd been cataloging me like one of his rare books. Except I wasn't finished yet. I slammed the journal shut, clutching it to my chest, every instinct screaming. A noise upstairs made me jump. Julian's footsteps. I shoved the journal back, adjusted the desk as best I could, and hurried to the kitchen, pretending to wash a glass. When Julian came in, loosening his tie, he smiled as if nothing in the world was amiss. But as he wrapped his arms around me, pressing his lips against my temple, all I could hear was the silence of that blank space beside my name. And I couldn't help but wonder, what was he planning to write there? That night, I didn't sleep at all. Not because of his tea, but because I finally realized my husband was keeping a ledger. And I wasn't sure if I was still alive in it. The next morning, I stared at Julian across the breakfast table, trying to see him the way I had before, the man who brought me coffee just the way I liked it, 2 sugars, no cream. The man who left notes in my pockets, the man who held me when the miscarriages broke me into pieces. But once you've seen your name in a book like that, once you've read words like terminated, written next to another woman's, you can't ever see him the same again. I forced myself to smile, to stir honey into my tea like I always did. He was watching me. I could feel it in the weight of his gaze, like a hand pressing against my back. So I tested him. I tilted my head and said casually, "Strange thing. I came across a woman at the library yesterday. Her name was Margaret Lyle. Do you know her?" The name wasn't random. It was the second one I'd memorized from his journal. Julian's hand froze halfway to his mouth. It was only a fraction of a second, but I saw it. His jaw tightened before he chuckled. "Margaret? No, doesn't ring a bell." "Why?" I shrugged. "She looked familiar. Thought maybe she came into your shop." He went back to sipping his coffee, but his eyes lingered on me, sharp, measuring. And in that moment, I knew the journal wasn't some eccentric collection. It was a ledger. And Margaret wasn't just a name. That night, when Julian was in the shower, I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and texted the only person I trusted with this. "Me. I found something. Can you come tomorrow? Please don't ask questions yet. Callie." Of course. Always. Callie Brooks had been my best friend since college, the kind of friend who'd show up at 3 a.m. with snacks and tissues after a breakup. She worked as a forensic accountant, the type of woman who could follow a money trail like a bloodhound. When she came the next day, I sat her down in my kitchen, slid my phone across the table, and showed her the photos I'd taken of Julian's journal. She didn't speak for a long time, just flipped through the images, her mouth tightening. Finally, she whispered, "Lena, these aren't just names. Look, see these codes? These are financial notes. He's logging transactions, payouts, transfers." My stomach lurched. Transfers from what? She looked up, her expression grim. From them. From their accounts, their assets, maybe even their insurance. Lena, I think he's been doing this for a long time. I pressed my hands over my mouth, trying not to sob. The man I thought loved me, the man I thought I knew, was treating me like an entry in his ledger. I looked straight at Callie, and for the first time, I said it out loud. What if I'm next? And then, just when I thought I'd seen enough, Callie found something in his numbers that made my blood turn to ice. Callie came back the next evening with her laptop, her expression tight in that way I'd only ever seen when she was unraveling fraud cases. She spread papers across my dining table, her fingers flying over spreadsheets she'd pieced together from the photos of Julian's journal. Okay, Lena, she said, her voice steady but low. These aren't just random notes. Your husband is moving money, big money, and he's been doing it under different names. I leaned forward, my stomach twisting. Different names? She turned the laptop toward me. My husband's face stared back from an old driver's license photo, except the name wasn't Julian Ward. It was Marcus Lowell. Another image, a passport, Ethan Cole. One man, 3 identities. Callie clicked through, showing me account after account. They all link back to him. Offshore accounts, insurance claims. He marries women, or at least gets close enough to access their finances, and then, she swallowed hard, they disappear. My blood went cold. She pulled up a missing persons report from Oregon. Margaret Lyle, the same name I'd tested on Julian. Vanished 3 years ago. Declared legally dead. Guess who was listed as her beneficiary under the alias Marcus Lowell? I clutched the edge of the table, my knuckles white. Oh my God. Callie, he's been doing this for years. Callie nodded grimly. At least 4 women, maybe more. And Lena, he's careful. Too careful. Which means, if your name is in that journal, you're not just another note. You're part of his plan. The room felt like it was spinning. I thought about every romantic gesture, every cup of tea, every time Julian insisted on handling the bills. He wasn't protecting me. He was cataloging me. I whispered, almost to myself, he's not even Julian. Callie reached across the table, gripping my hand. Listen to me. You need to play it smart. No sudden moves. No tipping him off. We need more evidence before the police will take this seriously. He's good at covering his tracks, but I can tie him to the accounts. We just need him to slip up, I wanted to scream, to pack a bag and run. But Callie was right. If I bolted now, he might come after me, and no one would believe me without proof. So instead, I sat in my quiet house that night, pretending to read a book while Julian brewed me another cup of tea. He kissed the top of my head, his lips lingering. Sleep well, my love. And I forced myself to smile back, holding the cup in my hands as if I wasn't imagining my name written in his ledger, waiting for a blank space to be filled. But Callie wasn't finished. Because the next thing she found in his accounts wasn't about the women before me. It was about me, my pension, my inheritance, and a date circled in red ink on his ledger that hadn't arrived yet. Callie came over 2 nights later, looking more rattled than I'd ever seen her. She didn't even wait to sit down before shoving her laptop toward me. Lena, I need you to stay calm, okay? The tone of her voice made my chest tighten. I braced myself as she opened a spreadsheet. I traced the transactions. He's already started moving money out of accounts tied to your name, your pension, and there's another transfer, one from your grandmother's estate. My heart dropped. That's impossible. I haven't touched that account. No, but he has. Callie's eyes burned with fury. He forged paperwork with your signature. And Lena, she hesitated before continuing. He set up a life insurance policy in your name, with himself listed as the beneficiary. The room went silent, except for the roar of blood in my ears. You mean, he's planning... I couldn't finish the sentence. Callie nodded grimly. It lines up with the ledger. There's a date marked 3 weeks from now. I think that's when he intends to make his move. I pressed my hands against my face, fighting to breathe. My husband, my Julian, was calculating my death like a financial transaction. When I looked up, Callie's expression was sharp, determined. We need to trap him, Lena. If we go to the police now, all we have are suspicions and financial breadcrumbs. But if we can get him talking, if we can catch him in the act— I shook my head violently. What if he finds out I know? What if he tries something sooner? Callie leaned closer, gripping my hand. Then you play along. You act like nothing's wrong. And we'll be ready. I promise you, Lena. I won't let him write your ending. That night I sat across from Julian at dinner, staring at the man who had been my husband for nearly 7 years. He poured me wine, smiled that easy smile that once made me melt, and asked about my day. I answered, laughing at his jokes, but my eyes kept drifting to the flicker of the candlelight, imagining it illuminating the journal, my name scrawled in ink beside a blank line, waiting. And for the first time, I wondered if Julian had noticed something different in me too, because his gaze lingered longer than usual, sharper, like he could sense that I knew. And then, just as Callie predicted, Julian made his first mistake, one that proved the mask he wore was finally starting to slip. Julian always prided himself on control. He never raised his voice, never lost his temper. Everything about him was measured. The way he dressed, the way he spoke, the way he cooked my favorite meals just before I had a chance to say I was hungry. But control has a way of unraveling when the threads start to pull loose. It happened on a Thursday night. I was putting away laundry when I noticed one of my blouses, the silk one Callie had bought me for my birthday, had been shredded. Not torn on accident, but cut clean, like someone had taken scissors to it. I carried it downstairs, holding it up. Julian, did you do this? He barely looked up from the fire he was tending. His jaw was tight, his smile too sharp. That blouse never suited you. Too flashy. I prefer you in softer colors. My stomach turned. That wasn't an answer. That was control. I forced a laugh, folding the blouse over my arm. You could have just told me. His eyes flickered to mine, dark and watchful. Sometimes showing is better than telling, don't you think? I excused myself and ran to the bathroom, locking the door with shaking hands. I texted Callie in frantic bursts. Me. He cut up my clothes. He's losing it. Callie. Stay calm. He's testing you. Don't react. Tomorrow we meet with the feds. Trust me, Lena. We're close. The next day, Callie marched me into a gray stone building downtown. FBI field office. I felt like I'd been dropped into one of her crime dramas. Detective Marcus Hale, tall, blunt, no nonsense, listened as Callie laid out the financial evidence. He studied the photos of the ledger on my phone. He's careful, Hale said finally, but not flawless. The forged documents and the offshore transfers give us jurisdiction. We'll need more, something that ties him directly to intent. Mrs. Ward, are you willing to help us set him up? The words hit like a brick. Set him up. My husband. The man I'd once dreamed of raising children with. I swallowed hard, my voice trembling. If it keeps me alive, I'll do it. That night, Julian poured me his usual cup of tea, sliding it across the counter with that charming smile. But his hand lingered a second too long on the rim of the mug, his eyes searching mine. And I realized, with a chill that sank into my bones, he wasn't just watching me anymore. He was waiting. And when the FBI set the trap, I thought I was ready. But nothing could have prepared me for the moment Julian stopped pretending and showed me who he really was. The FBI wanted me to act natural, smile, laugh, Pretend I was still the adoring wife who believed every word my husband fed me. Easier said than done. That Friday, I made his favorite dinner, rosemary chicken with roasted potatoes, the meal I used to make for anniversaries. I set the table with candles, poured the wine. Every movement felt mechanical, like I was a puppet tugged along by strings. Julian came home right on time, as he always did. He kissed my cheek, complimented the food, poured himself a glass. To anyone else, we looked like the picture of domestic bliss. But I could see it now. The cracks. The way his smile didn't reach his eyes. The way his hand twitched near his knife. The way his gaze flickered too often toward the leather journal, sitting on the buffet where I'd placed it deliberately. Halfway through dinner, my nerves snapped. I set down my fork and slid the journal across the table toward him. Funny thing, Julian. I came across this in your desk. His entire body went still. I leaned forward, my voice shaking but steady enough to carry. So tell me, how many women were there before me? Margaret? Elise? Vivian? All of them. Terminated, right? For a second I saw panic flicker in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by a smirk I'd never seen before. Cold. Predatory. He leaned back, swirling his wine like we were having a casual debate. You should have stopped reading when you saw your own name, Lena. My throat went dry. Why me? Julian chuckled, low and humorless. You were easy. You wanted a fairy tale. I gave you one. And soon. I'll take what I need, just like before. Money. Assets. No loose ends. He stood suddenly, the chair scraping back, his shadow looming over me. My heart slammed against my ribs. His hand reached for the knife. But before he could move, the front door burst open. FBI, don't move. Agents swarmed the dining room, weapons raised, voices commanding. Julian froze, his mask cracking into fury. They tackled him to the ground, wrenching the knife from his grip, cuffing his wrists. I sat frozen, staring as my husband, no, the stranger I had married, was dragged out of my house, shouting over his shoulder. This isn't over, Lena. You'll always be mine. The words rattled through me, sharp and venomous, and all I could do was grip the edge of the table, trying to convince myself it was finally over. But the story didn't end there. Because when the FBI uncovered his real name, I realized Julian Ward never existed at all, and the man I'd married was a predator wanted in 3 states. The morning after Julian's arrest, the house felt eerily quiet. No clinking of teacups, no creak of his study chair, no hum of his voice reading poetry aloud. Just silence, heavy and unfamiliar. I half expected him to walk through the door with that easy smile, as if the nightmare had been nothing more than a dream. But instead, it was Detective Marcus Hale who arrived, a folder in his hand and a grim expression on his face. He didn't sit right away. He stood in my kitchen, flipping open the file. Mrs. Ward, or should I say, Miss Donovan? Because the man you married isn't Julian Ward at all. My heart pounded as he laid out photograph after photograph. Driver's licenses, passports, bank records. His real name is Martin Kessler. He's been on our radar for over a decade. Multiple aliases, multiple missing women tied to him. He marries or ingratiates himself into their lives, drains their assets, and then... Hale's voice dropped. They disappear. We've linked him to at least 4 unsolved cases across 3 states. I pressed a hand to my mouth, bile rising in my throat. So all of it, Julian, the bookshop, our marriage, it was all a lie? Hale's gaze softened slightly. Not all. He needed a cover, and you were perfect for it. Smart, steady, financially secure. But make no mistake, Lena, you were his next victim. The ledger proves it. You were lucky to get out alive, lucky. The word felt like a stone in my stomach. Because luck didn't feel like the right word when the last 7 years of my life had been built on smoke and shadows. When Hale left, I sat at my dining table, staring at the burned-down candles from the night before. The wax pooled and hardened, frozen in place like the pieces of my life. For weeks after, I barely slept. I jumped at the creak of floorboards, checked every lock twice, startled at my own reflection in darkened windows. Therapy helped, slowly, and Callie never left my side. She reminded me every day, "You survived him. You took your story back." Eventually, the FBI called me in again, not as a victim this time, but as a consultant. They wanted my help understanding Martin's patterns, his psychology, his careful disguises, and for the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me that wasn't fear, strength. And though the scars will never fully fade, I know one thing for certain. Julian Ward never existed. But Lena Ward? She's still here. Stronger, smarter, and finally, free. If my story made you pause, made you think twice about who you trust, share it with someone who needs the warning. And if you're ready for more stories where betrayal meets survival, keep watching. Binge the next one right here on Flame and Fate Chronicles.